Do you find that you get a good score in reading, but a bad score in writing? I was also bogged down by this confusion, but as I moved from being a bad writer to a writing contest at a national level, I discovered what was really missing here. So in this video, I will show you how to fix that imbalance and finally become a strong writer. And you do want to stick around till the end because I would explain why doing intensive reading of magazine passages might not be a good idea. Let's get into this. Let's start by talking about the relationship between writing and reading. Typically speaking, they are both basic components of your pen work. However, there's a slight difference between them, and I like to use an analogy here to help you better understand this. Let's say you have a wall for display information. You come across it and see two cards that say A and B. You understand the information and you know what's happening out here. And then you walk away with the information with A and B in mind. And that's actually what's happening in the process of reading. You open up your book, read through it, and get information from it. But now suppose you are required to post information cards like this on the wall. You are required to create the information board, letting other people know A and B. Now simply knowing A and B is not enough, because while learning how to put up an information board, you need to know how to use the pins to get them all together. To make it specific, I like to draw a diagram demonstrating what's happening with the basics of English. First off, you gain two types of input. They're listening and reading. Through these two types of input, you absorb a certain accumulation of vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. After that, with accumulated vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar, you render the vocabulary, and grammar you absorbed into two types of output: writing and speaking. However, there's a depreciation of information throughout the process. Suppose there is 100% of the information in the original reading passage in terms of grammar and vocabulary. If you read it casually, we ignore words and grammar we do not know. Sometimes we think we understand it, though we understand it incorrectly. In fact, for second language learners, only 17% of words in the original passage are retained through reading. As for listening, the number is even lower. As you render it into your output, the depreciation happens again because we fail to convert the words and grammar we learned into the active words and grammar. To that end, we may get the idea. To read better, we must decrease the depreciation. We need to do closer and more careful learning of the original passages through either reading or listening. And we should also practice our output frequently. The way I see it, not doing intensive reading is the number one setback stopping us from becoming a good writer. That's also exactly what happened to most students, including me, previously. Throughout high school and my first 2 years in college, I found myself never delving into intensive reading because I used to believe that as soon as I understood a certain passage, as soon as I got the information, I was good to go. And because tests back then did not cover a variety of writing assignments, I did not write often, which unfortunately failed to help us convert as many as possible words and vocab into our active vocabulary. But how do we do intensive reading correctly? And what kinds of passages should we go for? And that's what I like to talk about next. Now let's talk about how to do intensive reading, a type of reading that requires us to pay close attention to all the details of a passage. So how can we tell if we fully understand a sentence? My suggestion is that we ask ourselves 3 questions as we read every sentence. First question, does this sentence include a certain unique structure that I didn't know or I never used in my writing? If the answer is yes, then we need to pay close attention to the structure of the sentence. For example, a sentence that includes an object clause. This is a type of sentence not used by many Chinese students because we don't have a counterpart in our native language. Second question, does this sentence include a word or phrase that I do not know, either its meaning or how to use it? If we find a phrase like that, highlight it and look into it and remember to record it. Third question, what role does this sentence play in the context? Is it a topic sentence that claims the overall point of the author? Is it an example to back up the author's opinion? Or is it just a transitional sentence that opens up another point of view? If we can answer all these 3 questions, we finish a proper intensive reading. Yeah, you can see that the rules of intensive reading are quite simple. but what's really important is that we actually do it. All right, what kinds of materials should we go for? Remember the process diagram we talked about before? Our process for doing intensive reading is to help us become better writers, which means that we do intensive reading of the genre or type we plan to write. That's it. We read what we're going to write. So, if we're going to take on an essay assignment in a text, for example, we're going to take on the IELTS, we do the intensive reading of sample essays. And if we're going to write a newsletter, we do intensive reading of news articles. If we're going to write an application letter, say for a degree, then we do the intensive reading of application letters. We imitate the style, the word usage, and the structure. Yeah, that'll do it. Just read what you're going to write. And that's actually the reason why many people don't read intensively, because they don't write at all. The best way to learn something is to find your motivation to purpose in the first place. So I highly suggest that we develop a habit of writing on a daily basis, or at least on a regular basis. Also, I have a very common suggestion for intensive reading, and that is our textbooks. Textbooks include essays that are well chosen, covering all types, all genres, and all difficulty levels. These passages are carefully picked by someone with super decent, super advanced English proficiency, and we can put our trust in them. And then comes the bonus tip. Why do I think doing intensive reading of magazine passages is not actually a good idea? First, as I mentioned before, read what you're going to write. And you are not very likely to write a magazine article. Also, it is widely suggested that our English tests or examinations include passages excerpted from magazines. Well, that is partially true. Yes, the reading materials from those exams are excerpted from magazines, but too often they do not include topics like the latest events like Trump's tariff policy. So if you're about to take a test, you may just read passages from previous tests. You don't need these magazines actually. So my point of view is that magazine passages are only for casual reading. As long as you get the information, that's enough. You don't need to study them intensively. The role is just to tell you what's happening. So a magazine is a casual reading material that you can probably finish a magazine for 1 or 2 days. And yeah, that's all for the sharing. I'm Shawn English here. Remember, happy learning. I know you would, and I will see you next time.